Everybody, at 1:04 in the morning on Saturday, the August 15th, 2026, the residents of Granada, Spain, woke up to something they will not forget for a long time. A magnitude 5.2 earthquake, centered approximately 1 kilometer southwest of the municipality of Otura in the Granada metropolitan area, shook the historic city and its surroundings with enough force to send debris cascading off buildings, crack facades, knock cornices from roof lines, trigger rockfalls, and trap people in elevators. Over 300 emergency calls flooded Spain's emergency services within minutes. More than 85 interventions were performed by emergency crews across southern Granada. At least one building was evacuated as a precaution near the epicenter. Broken tiles were photographed at the entrance of the San Miguel Bajo Church, one of Granada's historic landmarks, as stunned tourists tried to capture what they were seeing. And Spain's regional government of Andalusia activated the emergency phase level 1 of its seismic risk emergency plan. This is the strongest earthquake Granada has experienced since 2021, and it did not arrive alone, everybody. In the 8 hours before the main earthquake struck, at least 4 smaller tremors, magnitudes ranging from 2 to 3. 7 had already rattled locations across the Granada metropolitan area. This was not one isolated event. This was a seismic swarm. 200 aftershocks have been recorded since the main earthquake. And emergency officials are telling the public clearly, more aftershocks are coming, and you need to be ready for them. Happy Sunday, everybody. Mark here. No hype, no drama, just what you need to know. This happened less than 24 hours ago. This is breaking. And every person in Granada and across Andalusia needs to understand what is happening beneath their feet. Let's get right into it. It was just after 1 in the morning. Granada is a city of approximately 230,000 people, and the broader metropolitan area adds significantly to that. It is one of Spain's most celebrated tourist destinations, home to the Alhambra Palace, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the seat of Spain's last Muslim kingdom, and the Albaicin neighborhood, another UNESCO site of winding Moorish streets and whitewashed buildings dating back centuries. On any given summer night in August, Granada's population swells with tourists from across Europe and the world, drawn by the summer heat, the historic architecture, and the flamenco culture that gives this corner of Andalusia its character. Those tourists, along with the city's residents, woke just after 1 a.m. to the ground moving. The earthquake occurred at 1:04 a.m. Its epicenter was centered approximately 1 kilometer southwest of Otura in the Granada metropolitan area. AFP described it as a rare earthquake that woke residents in the middle of the night and damaged buildings. The Spain-based outlet Colombia One confirmed the main seismic event was preceded by at least 4 earthquakes in the 8 hours prior, with magnitudes ranging from 2 to 3. 7 across the Granada metropolitan area. Tremors that had already increased residents' concern and led authorities to heighten monitoring before the main shock arrived. What the earthquake did physically to the city is visible in the photographs and the emergency call data. Over 300 emergency calls received by Spain's emergency services. More than 85 interventions carried out, especially in southern Granada, falling cornices and facade elements cascading onto streets and pathways below, roof elements breaking loose, cracks appearing in buildings. At least one building evacuated as a precaution near the epicenter. People trapped in elevators, one of the most immediately life-threatening consequences of sudden, strong shaking, because elevator cables and mechanisms can be damaged mid-travel by seismic energy. Rockfalls triggered on hillsides and slopes in the surrounding mountainous terrain. Debris scattered on the stepped pathway at the entrance of San Miguel Bajo Church, one of the most photographed images from the aftermath, circulated internationally. A building with visible cracks and fallen debris photographed in Granada's streets. Emergency teams deployed building by building across affected municipalities to assess possible damage before the sun came up. The good news, and it is genuinely good news given what could have been, is that no injuries have been confirmed. No fatalities. The Alhambra Palace, the crown jewel of Granada's architectural heritage, a structure that has survived for nearly 700 years, including through previous earthquakes, sustained no significant damage according to officials. And Spain's first vice president, Carlos Cuerpo, responded immediately, stating that the priority is to follow the situation minute by minute, review buildings where damage is reported, and provide citizens with clear, verified, and useful information. But the emergency officials added a warning that everybody watching this needs to hear. Andalusia's top emergency official, Antonio Sanz, said in a translated memo, 200 tremors have hit the epicenter area since the start of the earthquake, many of which were not felt by the population. The occurrence of further aftershocks is within the expected evolution of a seismic series of this nature. The public should be aware of this to avoid alarm, remain calm, and always follow the information provided by scientific organizations and official services. 200 tremors since the main earthquake in less than 24 hours? The ground beneath Granada has been in almost constant motion, and more is coming. The Granada Basin, the geological depression in which the city sits, is one of the most seismically active regions in the Iberian Peninsula. It sits at the intersection of several major tectonic elements associated with the convergence between the African plate and the Eurasian plate across the western Mediterranean. The broad collision between Africa and Europe, the same collision that built the Alps, the Pyrenees, the Atlas Mountains of North Africa, and the Atlas of Morocco, is expressed in southern Spain through a network of complex, interlocking fault systems that crosscut the Betic Cordillera, the mountain range running through Andalusia. The specific faults responsible for Granada's seismicity include the Granada Basin Fault System, a series of normal faults that bound the basin on multiple sides, and deeper structures associated with the subduction remnants and collision tectonics of the western Mediterranean. The region has been tectonically active for millions of years and shows no signs of becoming seismically quiet. Spain's National Geographic Institute, which monitors seismicity across the Iberian Peninsula, maintains that the Granada metropolitan area is one of the highest priority monitoring zones in Spain precisely because of this geological complexity. And Spain's most devastating recent earthquake history gives this morning's event in Granada its full weight. In May 2011, a magnitude 5. 2 earthquake struck near the town of Lorca in Murcia, southern Spain. 9 people died. More than 130 were injured. Approximately 20,000 buildings were damaged. Lorca's mayor said that almost no one slept in their homes. The entire town of 90,000 people essentially spent the night outdoors, in cars, in public squares, and in the streets. The Church of San Mateo and the Church of Santiago, both historic structures in Lorca's heritage district, were severely damaged. The magnitude of the Lorca earthquake, 5. 2. The same magnitude as this morning's Granada earthquake. And yet 9 people died in Lorca from a 5. 2. The difference between 0 deaths in Granada and 9 deaths in Lorca is not random. It is a combination of time of day, more at 1 a.m., meant people were inside and not walking under building facades, and building stock differences between the two areas. But the Lorca comparison is the most important context for understanding what a magnitude 5, 2 in southern Spain is actually capable of. It is not a minor earthquake. Under different conditions, a 5. 2 in this region kills people. The fact that nobody died this morning does not mean the earthquake was insignificant. It means the most dangerous outcomes were, this time, avoided. The Gójar seismic risk analysis noted this directly. It referenced the 2011 Lorca earthquake and described it as 9 fatalities despite a moderate magnitude of 5. 1. And their guide on seismic risk when buying property in Spain used today's Granada earthquake as the most current example of why the seismic risk of the Betic Cordillera and the broader Andalusian region deserves serious attention from everyone who lives or spends time there. In the 8 hours before the magnitude 5, 2 main shock, at least 4 earthquakes of magnitudes. 2 to 3. 7 struck across the Granada metropolitan area. This is a 4-shock sequence, smaller events that preceded the main shock. But here is what makes 4-shock sequences so challenging to communicate to the public. You cannot tell a 4-shock from a main shock until after the main shock has arrived. When those magnitude 2 to 3, 7 earthquakes were striking in the hours before 1:04 a.m., nobody knew whether they were isolated small events or the buildup to something larger. Emergency monitoring was heightened, but no evacuation was ordered, because the data at that moment did not yet indicate that a larger event was coming. That is the fundamental challenge of 4-shock sequences in earthquake science. They look identical to any other small earthquake sequence until after the main shock reveals their true character. And it is one of the reasons why earthquake early warning research, the kind being done on axial seamount at USGS monitoring networks across the United States and by Spain's IGN in the Betic Cordillera, is so important. The goal is not to predict earthquakes with absolute certainty. The goal is to detect the earliest possible signal that something significant is building and give communities the most possible lead time. In this morning's case, the 4-4 shocks gave enough of a signal that monitoring was heightened, but not enough to justify the kind of mass public warning that might have prompted people to sleep outdoors before the main shock arrived. And at 1:04 a.m., the main shock arrived anyway. Now, 200 aftershocks recorded since the main shock. 200. And officials warn that more are expected. The aftershock distribution is telling scientists exactly which fault segments moved, where the stress has been redistributed, and where the most elevated hazard now sits in the aftermath of the main rupture. In a city with the building stock vulnerabilities that Granada has, where historic structures of varying ages and construction quality sit alongside modern buildings, and where earthquake engineering has improved in recent decades, but where much of the older housing stock predates modern seismic codes, each significant aftershock is a new stress test on structures that the main shock may have already weakened. A building that survived the magnitude 5, 2 main shocks structurally may have been weakened enough by that event that a magnitude 4, 5 aftershock causes the failure it managed to avoid in the main shock. This is the Kumamoto 2016 pattern, where the magnitude 7. 3 main shock caused widespread damage, but the magnitude 7. 3 main shock 2 days later caused buildings weakened in the first event to collapse in the second. Granada is not dealing with magnitude 7 earthquakes, but the principle is the same at every scale. Weakened structures are vulnerable to subsequent events, and the 200 aftershocks already recorded are telling everyone that the sequence is not finished. The Alhambra Palace and Fortress Complex sits on a hill above Granada, the Sabica Hill, commanding views of the Sierra Nevada mountains and the city below. It was constructed primarily during the 14th century under the Nasrid dynasty, the last Muslim rulers of the Iberian Peninsula. It passed into Christian hands in 1492 when Ferdinand and Isabella completed the Reconquista. It has survived more than 700 years. It has survived previous earthquakes in the Granada region. And this morning, officials confirmed it sustained no significant damage from the magnitude 5, 2 earthquake. AFP's report from the scene was specific. Officials confirmed no casualties or serious damage, notably to the southern city's Alhambra Palace. The AFP photographer at the scene of the San Miguel Bajo Church, in the Albaycin neighborhood near the Alhambra, captured the broken tiles at the church entrance. Broken tiles, but no structural failure. For a building constructed in the medieval period on a hillside that has been shaking intermittently for centuries, surviving a magnitude 5. 2 in 2026 is exactly what its construction through generations of maintenance and occasional reinforcement was designed to achieve. But the Albaycin, the Moorish quarter that UNESCO designated as a World Heritage Site, is precisely the kind of historical urban fabric that makes earthquake vulnerability so complex in Granada. The buildings there are historic. Many are centuries old. Many have been modified, subdivided, and adapted over generations in ways that may have altered their original structural character without formal engineering assessment. The narrow, winding streets make post-earthquake inspection difficult, and the hillside terrain of the Albaycin means that rockfall and slope instability from the earthquake's shaking at a hazard dimension that flat urban areas do not face. The building-by-building reviews that officials initiated after the main shock, across affected municipalities, including the historic core, are exactly the right response. Not just for identifying immediate structural failures, but for identifying the buildings that need immediate engineering assessment to determine whether they are safe to reoccupy before the next significant aftershock arrives. The Campi Flegrei caldera near Naples, the supervolcano whose ground has been rising 10 millimeters every month since 2005, produced its new 40-year record earthquake of magnitude 4, 7 on August 1st, just 2 weeks ago. A new 40-year record. And on the same continent, less than 2 weeks later, Granada is dealing with a magnitude 5. 2, the strongest in the region since 2021, with 200 aftershocks and an ongoing swarm. The seismically active arc that runs from the Azores through Portugal and Spain, along the Betic Cordillera through southern Spain, across the Strait of Gibraltar into Morocco, and then east through Algeria and Tunisia before turning north through Italy and Greece. That entire arc is alive. Every component of it is expressing the fundamental tectonic reality of Africa pushing northward into Europe. And the Betic Cordillera of Andalusia, the mountain system running through Almeria, Murcia, and Granada, is one of the most geologically complex and seismically active portions of that entire arc. Southern Spain has experienced significant earthquakes multiple times in the modern era. The 2011 Lorca earthquake killed 9 people from a magnitude 5. 2. The 2011 Murcia earthquake killed 9 people. 1884 earthquake in Andalusia near the city of Arenas del Rey, located just 40 kilometers from the epicenter of today's Granada earthquake, killed approximately 800 to 1,000 people. 800 to 1,000 people from an earthquake that struck essentially the same geological region that shook at 1:04 this morning. The difference between 2026's 0 deaths and 1884's 1,000 deaths is building codes, building materials, modern infrastructure, emergency response capability, and the middle-of-the-night timing that kept people away from collapsing facades. But the fault systems that ruptured in 1884 are the same fault systems that are still active today. They have not been exhausted. They have not been released. They are still accumulating stress at the same rate they always have. The official guidance from Andalusia's emergency management is the right guidance. Remain calm. Follow the information provided by scientific organizations and official services. Be aware that further aftershocks are expected in the coming days. Learn self-protection guidelines. Drop, cover, and hold on during shaking. Avoid damaged buildings until they have been assessed by engineers. Follow instructions from local authorities on which structures are safe to reoccupy. If you are a tourist in Granada right now, know the emergency exit from your hotel or accommodation. Know what to do when shaking starts. Do not shelter in doorways. That is an outdated guideline. Drop to the floor, get under a sturdy table or desk if available, cover your head and neck with your arms, and hold on until the shaking stops. If you are outside, move away from buildings, trees, streetlights, and overhead power lines. For the historic buildings of the Alhambra and the Albaicin, visitor access should be guided by official guidance from the Alhambra Management Authority and from Granada's Civil Protection Services. With 200 aftershocks already recorded and more expected, assessments are ongoing. Follow the official guidance. And for the people of Granada who live with this geological reality every day, you are not alone in this. Spain's seismological institutions, its emergency management services, and your regional government are actively monitoring and actively responding. The scientific knowledge to understand this seismic swarm, to track its evolution, and to give you the best possible guidance exists. Trust it. Follow it. This earthquake happened less than 24 hours ago. The aftershock sequence is ongoing. I will keep tracking every update. That is my commitment. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for your incredible support. And before I go, a quick word from our Father. Psalm 46, talked 2 through 3. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Everybody, though, the mountains quake with their surging. The Betic Cordillera of Andalusia quaked last night. The Sierra Nevada rose and fell. The stones of the San Miguel Bajo Church fell from their places. And he saw every single one of it. He saw every person thrown awake at 1:04 in the morning. He saw every emergency call. He saw every firefighter deployed and every building inspector walking through cracked corridors in the dark before dawn. None of them were outside his sight. All glory always goes to God, our Father in heaven, Yahweh. I pray he brings full calm to the ground beneath Granada, keeps every aftershock from causing harm, and protects every person in Andalusia in the days ahead. Amen. Hallelujah. Amen. Stay safe, everybody. Follow the official guidance. And I will see you in the next update.